All right, we're now joined by Senator Ryan Fazio and Senator James Maroney. Senators, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. So first of all, could you each give us a little brief description of what your role is here?
Actually, we should also introduce Senator James Maroney as well from Milford. I don't know if you said that.
James Maroney.
Yeah.
We're having a sound problem here. It's very loud. But my name's Ryan Fazio. I'm the state senator from the 36th district, so Greenwich, Stamford, and New Canaan. I'm in my second term. I'm the ranking member of the Energy and Technology Committee and Planning and Development Committee. So energy and local regulations are very important to the time I spend up here. And I'm on the Finance Committee and the Transportation Committee. So quality of life, cost of living, economic growth are also very important to my work here.
A lot of important stuff.
Thank you. I'm James Maroney. I'm a state senator from the 14th district, which is Milford, Orange, West Haven, and a tiny piece of Woodbridge. I am co-chair of the General Law Committee. We focus on mainly consumer issues, so anything that would really touch Department of Consumer Protection, which is really a wide range of issues. Vice chair of Veterans, ranking member of Regs Review. Then I'm also on finance, education, higher education, and energy.
Great. So first up, I'm going to go with Senator Fazio. You're on the task force on affordable housing. What do you see happening with that this year?
So we've had some pretty interesting conversations in the off season, and I would say that they've been constructive. Historically, the issue of housing and local control have been, I think, pretty contentious, and rightly so, because some of the proposals that have come to the floor of the House and the Senate, or rather past committee in the Housing Committee and the Planning and Development Committee, I think really went too far in taking away local discretion over planning and zoning and housing policies. I think we have a great tradition in this state of local democracy and local discretion where communities are engaged in issues. And we need from that framework to work to increase the affordable housing stock and the housing stock generally. So I think, bills like Fair Share and Work, Live, Ride went too far past their skis in taking away local control. But I think to the credit of the majority leaders, Rojas and Duff, the majority leaders task force on housing has been a constructive conversation with all different stakeholders at the table. And hopefully we can find a way to both protect local discretion and control over housing and zoning issues while increasing the housing stock. And we've basically tried to develop, or we're trying to develop on that task force, a menu of options, for lack of a better term, a diner menu, so a big menu of options to increase the housing stock. And hopefully we can do that in a less contentious and adversarial way between localities and the state, in a more collaborative way in the future.
Great. Senator Maroney, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, housing is economic development, right?
Yeah.
You look at right now, Chief estimates we're short 92,500 affordable housing units in the state. We're only building 5,000 to 6,500 housing units a year. It's 18 years to at that pace to get the housing that we need. We're also short 100,000 workers. We have almost 100,000 open jobs. Again, correlation, not necessarily causation, but you can't live in a computer. You need somewhere to work, somewhere to live if you're going to come here to work. And so really, we need to look at this as an economic development issue.
Great. Brian?
Yeah, I pose this question for both of you. You both have diverse districts. You have kind of an urban area, urban communities, but also rural and more suburban. How do you balance that? As far as it relates to housing, Yeah,
and we actually have a very diverse housing stock. When you look at it, we have capes, we have large houses, we have parts of my district that don't have sewers, and parts of the district where along the coastline you have a tenth of an acre lot. So it is a balancing act, looking at the different needs of the district. But it does in some ways represent the different needs of the state, right? We do have a diverse state with rural areas and smaller urban areas and a lot of suburban areas. So it is helpful to get the different viewpoints when you're coming up here as well.
Right.
Yeah, I represent a fairly dense and urban district, probably the most among Senate Republicans and more so than most in the Senate generally. Greenwich is pretty economically and ethnically diverse, more than people think it is, especially on the west side. We have 4 Title I schools, so more than 40% of the population being free and reduced lunch. The west side of town is pretty working class, middle class in many neighborhoods. And we've done a lot in Greenwich in particular to increase our affordable housing stock by about 8 or 9% in just the last 3 or 4 years. Stanford's obviously a very diverse and dynamic city, and I represent about 25,000 people in Stanford. Again, these are complicated issues, and I think your question got to the nuance of actually advancing positive housing policies, which is why I think we need to leverage the discretion and the expertise of the localities and local leaders in order to move towards those goals rather than putting upon or imposing a one-size-fits-all solution. So I think the complexities of our different districts show why we need to leverage that local expertise and discretion while also moving towards that goal.
Great. Senator Murray, let's start with you next. One thing we wanted to talk about was you are on a task force on AI. How will AI affect state and municipal government?
It's an excellent question, and I think that one of the things we did last year in a bipartisan way is we did pass a law regulating state government use of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, we just asked them to come up with policies and procedures and make sure you're testing that to ensure that there are no disparate impacts on our citizens. So that policy has been put forth. It's required to be posted publicly. So it's a good model for local governments to use, so they don't need to go out and recreate their own. But one of the recommendations, coming out of the task force was to look at ways that we can utilize AI within government, right? And how can we make it more efficient in interacting with our constituents? I think looking at what they call low-risk uses like chatbots, where you're making information easier to find. And as part of the legislation, we're going to look at, similar to what California did through their executive order, asking the agencies to work with the workers to come up with recommendations and go through a committee to come up with some pilot plans that we can use in probably, maybe not this year, but maybe starting next year, that we can put in effect to make government more easy to interact with for our constituents.
Yeah. Ryan, does CCM have any positions on AI stuff?
No, I think we're kind of waiting and seeing how it might impact us. I know when you look at, let's say municipal employees, they might be concerned about the loss of jobs.
Right.
So to the extent that you think that this is a growth industry within Connecticut, how does that interrelate with some of the responsibilities of local government?
Yeah, and so there's good news and bad news, right? Let's start with the bad news. Bad news is over the next 10 years, they're saying 85 million jobs are going to be lost because of AI. The good news is over that same time period, 97 million new jobs will be created because of AI. We have to keep in mind, though, that some job classes will be gone, right? And so we need to be very mindful about training opportunities, involving our employees and making sure we're giving them the opportunity to upskill and reskill to be able to effectively compete and not even compete. I mean, they're saying that AI will make us 30% more efficient, right, in how we interact. So we need to teach people how to use AI in their jobs, how to use it responsibly, understand the data privacy implications of taking constituent data and putting it into a public model like ChatGPT. So we need to provide tools and look at that. One of the things we did recommend, being mindful of not putting mandates on local school districts, was that looking at having the State Department of Education create professional development for teachers. SUNY Albany has done a great program with AI across the curriculum, and really AI is going to be part of everything we do going forward. It's not going to be one area. And so instead of mandating to teach that, creating resources for the local school systems, and also asking them to create model policies that the local school districts can choose to implement, but at least they'll have something to start from.
That's great. Senator Fazio, I don't know if you have any comments on AI or other growth opportunities in like the financial sector or elsewhere.
Yeah, well, some would say that there's been a lot of artificial intelligence in government for many years before the technological revolutions of modern days. But I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of Senator Maroney's committee. Senator Maroney's a great example that collaboration and listening and hard work is the best way to be a good leader. And the products that come out of his committee, very frequently get bipartisan support because of his leadership and Chairman D'Agostino's leadership and the ranking members' positive contributions too. So I look forward to what comes out of his committee, and I'm always happy to work towards positive goals with him and other colleagues.
Great.
Great. Senator Fazio, let's start with you again. What are some other issues that you're hoping to focus on in this session?
Well, I think cost of living and economic growth generally is always going to be the most important issue. Connecticut is a state with very high taxes, very high cost of living, and has been generally economically stagnant for a long period of time, although we've seen a slight acceleration of the economy in the past few years for several different reasons. One of the reasons is certainly the bipartisan budget deal from 2017 that imposed a lot of fiscal guardrails that limited government spending, limited debt issuance, and built a rainy day fund so that we were actually able to afford a small tax cut last year for the first time in since probably I was a very, very young child. So maintaining those fiscal guardrails, maintaining a more prudent and middle of the road fiscal policy so that we can grow the economy. We don't overburden taxpayers. We can actually cut taxes in the future rather than return to the tax and spend ways of the past, I think is a top priority. And then I think in a short session, there are also, I think, regulatory reforms that can improve economic growth. One thing that Senator Maroney and I worked on last year was getting a licensing fee cut through his committee on general law, which I think will improve economic growth for middle class and working class people who require licenses to do their work. So those types of piecemeal reforms, I think, add up to something very positive for the future of the state economy.
Great. Brian, anything you want to respond to?
I think it's fascinating. I think, some of the fiscal guardrails, obviously sometimes if maybe there's some flexibility that people are looking for and how that may, help facilitate some education funding and some of the other things that we've made commitments to. And I think, but at the same time, the fiscal guardrails have been very effective in reducing our unfunded liabilities and the pensions, which are very important to us. Just a few years ago, the governor and the previous governor tried to transition the teachers' retirement system onto us because of those pressures, and the additional payments have helped alleviate that concern. So, we appreciate all your hard work. I know it's a difficult issue because you got a lot of people asking for money and spend here, but at the same time, the reason why we're competitive with the other 50 states now is because of those fiscal guardrails.
Great. And as I just announced, the Senate's going to convene in about 15 minutes, so we don't have...
It probably won't.
But while we still have them here, Senator Maroney, any issues that you're looking to focus on during this session?
Thank you very much. And again, thanks to Senator Fazio for his leadership on the issue of trying to reduce the fees for occupational licenses. We do have, I think, one of the states with the most licensed occupations in the country, and so that would be relief for workers to go there. So this session, there are some issues in general law we're looking at cleaning up. There'll be a lot of issues that come there. I'm also looking at trying to find a funding source for the Early Childhood Trust Fund, increasing access to high-quality early childhood education. I mean, we know, one, it's a workforce issue. Senator Biden testified to the Education Committee last year. There are 40,000 women who have not re-entered the workforce because they can't find early childhood education. We know families can't afford it. Our providers are not being paid adequately. And we know what a difference it makes in someone's life. It really changes the trajectory of someone's life. Those interventions at 0 to 3 are critical. So that's probably, it's one of my top priorities, as well as I am working on a housing related bill. It's more on the down payment, not down payment, but on deposit assistance when you're looking to rent. So,
That's great.
Brian, any other questions you have for Senator?
No, at this time, I just want to thank both of you, both Senator Fazio and Senator Maroney, for joining us today, sharing your insights on the next legislative session, and we look forward to working with you in the upcoming 3.5 months. I know it's a short session, but it's the same amount of work, just compressed. So good luck.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for doing it.